Within every human being, there are two minds or two centers of thought. One mind is what we would refer to as the carnal mind or the animal mind, the mind that is dominated by the senses, the one that pays attention to 3D things, pays attention to what is around us, what is observed by the senses, the sensual mind. And the second mind is the spiritual mind, the mind of the Creator, the mind of Christ, as it is referred to in the Bible, or the 4D mind, the mind that can see beyond what is registered by our physical human senses and can perceive into what is beyond the nature of reality itself, which is, of course, that we are living in a universe that is emerging from consciousness, and that all that we behold, that what appears to be without, it is in truth within, meaning that all that we perceive is consciousness. Now, the lower mind, the carnal mind, would consider this idea to be foolishness, because the lower carnal mind can only believe or perceive what is 3D, what is actually tangible and registerable by our senses. But to the higher mind, this is the only model of reality that makes sense. The spiritual mind knows this to be true, knows that all that we behold is in truth consciousness. Now, life as we know it is an interaction between these two centers of thought, between these two minds. And in this path of mastery of what it means to be human, we are really learning to allow that spiritual mind to ascend through the spiral of the carnal mind and become a source, a center of enlightened reason, to eventually allow our lives to be guided by the spiritual mind, guided by enlightened reason. Now, this path through the spiral of evolution that each one of us is walking is described in tremendous detail in the countless stories of the Bible, which take place not in history, but rather within the confines of our own minds. As every story, every character, every circumstance, every situation, every drama that is portrayed in these biblical stories actually takes place within our own consciousness as the battle, in a manner of speaking, between that lower carnal mind and the mind of Christ. Welcome to Sunday Mystery School. In today's lesson, we are going to dive into Neville's original masterclass, the original masterclass of the famed mystic, legendary mystic, Neville Goddard. And the title of lesson 3 is Thinking Fourth Dimensionally. Thinking from the spiritual mind, thinking from the Christ mind, thinking from the mind of enlightened reason, thinking from the mind that dwells in the higher centers of imagination and is able to perceive that which is beyond the limited evidence of our senses. In today's lesson, we're going to begin going into this study of fourth dimensional thinking. There's quite a bit to cover today. There is a new link, as it is a new lesson, and that link lives where it always lives, in the video description on YouTube, and it's also in the chat for the Zoom members who have joined me in the Zoom room. So if you would like to follow along with the new lesson, the text is available there for you. And there's quite a bit to get to today. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. But before we do that, there's such a precious opportunity that we have in this moment to speak a blessing over everyone who is gathered here, over all of those of you who have joined me live in the live stream, all of the Mastermind members in the Zoom room, and from a place of gratitude, appreciation, and frankly, just love for humankind. This is our opportunity to speak a blessing over all beings, over all creation. I invite you to join me in doing so now. I turn now to go within, drawing my senses inward into the center of my own being. I offer gratitude and appreciation in this moment for the perfection that is this present moment. In gratitude, we accept that we are, and we declare that we are wise souls, growing, healthy, youthful minds. Thank you that we are feeling now the presence of life force energy, awakening, enlivening, and making whole our physical bodies in this physical dimension. Thank you that our relationships are now healed and made whole with love, compassion, and understanding. Thank you that we have humbly accepted our power and our responsibility to imagine wisely as sovereign co-creators and authors of this world we share. Thank you that we are inspired by life-expanding, consciousness-uplifting possibilities that are manifesting now. We honor the ancestors, those that have walked this path ahead of us and set us up for success. Thank you for the wisdom passed down from the ancients, woven into the fabric of reality all around us, in the spirit of liberating our hearts and our minds. And thank you that together we welcome the inheritance of our bright and a beautiful future. And so it is. Moving into the text now of Neville Goddard's Masterclass, Lesson 3, Part 1, I'm going to give the intro as Neville spoke it in 1948. And then we're going to do something just a little bit different than how we've normally done these mystery school lessons in the past. I'm going to take a pause from Neville's words, and I'm going to read the passage from the Bible that he is using to tell the story. And the reason we're going to do this is because there is more to this passage than Neville decodes in this text. There are more insights. And I think really it was just for time that he did not go through each and every element of the story. Because as we know, these ancient storytellers, they were telling stories about us. They're telling stories about states of mind, states of being that are occurring within our own consciousness. And so every character that is presented, their name, their nature, how they show up, how they're dressed, what they do, what they say, the things that are happening. This is a drama. And every element of the drama that the storytellers chose to include is a conscious and intentional inclusion. And every single aspect of it is a communication about a higher, deeper dimensional truth that is being illustrated or portrayed, dramatized in these stories. And so Neville touches on some of these points, but if you go and you look at the actual scriptures, there's more to it than what he surfaces. So we're going to actually get a little bit deeper than even Neville did when he originally did this lesson. And I think that's important to do so. But before we jump into that, let's go ahead and give the introduction, thinking fourth dimensionally. Neville begins by saying, there are two actual outlooks on the world possessed by every human being. Ancient storytellers were fully conscious of these two outlooks. They called one the carnal mind and the other the mind of Christ. We recognize these two centers of thought in the statement, and this is a Bible verse from 1 Corinthians. The statement, the verse goes, the natural man, the one living in the 3D mind, receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, for they are spiritually discerned. That's 1 Corinthians 2:14. Neville explains this verse by saying to the natural mind, Now, the natural mind is the animal mind, the carnal mind, the fleshly 3D mind, the mind that is focused upon the evidence of the senses, what is happening right now. This is also the part of us that is most likely to react to things that are happening dramatized on the screen of space. Whatever that instant reaction is, chances are that is a reaction driven by the carnal mind. The carnal mind is also home of fear, okay? Fear and some of these really carnal, physical 3D emotions live in the carnal or natural mind. Neville says to the natural mind, reality is confined to this instant called now. Now is all that exists in the eyes of the carnal, fleshly, animal mind. This very moment appears or seems to contain the whole of reality, and everything else seems to be unreal. To the natural mind, that animal, human 3D thinking mind, the past and the future are purely imaginary and don't actually exist. In other words, my past, when I am thinking from my natural mind, is only a memory image of things that were. And to the limited, three-dimensional, small-minded focus of the carnal or natural mind, the future does not even exist. The natural mind does not believe that it could revisit the past and see it as something that is present, something that is objective and concrete to itself. Neither does it believe that the future exists. To the Christ mind, which is the higher dimensional mind, the mind that lives not in the realm of flesh, but in the realm of imagination. This is also the Christ mind, the spiritual mind, the mind of enlightened reason, and also higher dimensional thinking. To that mind, in our language, you're going to call that the fourth dimensional focus or fourth dimensional mind. The past, the present, and the future of the natural mind are all present as a solitary whole, meaning it all exists as one thing. This is going one layer higher in our dimensional thinking. And instead of seeing, there's the past, and now we're in the present, and the past is imaginary, but we're in the present, and the future is imaginary, we're here in the present. When we zoom out to this higher dimensional level of thinking, we see the past, the present, and the future all as one living, existing, vibrating whole. And that is the perspective of the mind of Christ, the mind of God, the mind of the Creator, and the higher dimensional, or in this case, 4D mind. This mind takes in the entire array of sensory impressions that man has encountered in the past, is encountering in the present, and will encounter in the future. And again, considers them all to be present and real. This vibrating whole that simply is. The only reason you and I are functioning as we are today and not aware of the greater outlook, assuming that's true, assuming that we're not aware of the greater outlook, the only reason why we wouldn't be aware of the greater outlook, according to Neville, is simply because we are creatures of habit. And habit renders us totally blind to what otherwise we should see. But, and this is an important point, habit is not law. It acts as though it were the most compelling force in the world. I mean, which one of us has not had a habit that was potentially hard to break? Habit acts as though it were the most compelling force in the world, but in truth, it is not law, meaning that it is not immutable. Habits can be shifted. Okay? They are not law, meaning we can create a new approach to life. We can transcend the carnal mind and allow our lives to become piloted by the higher dimensional spiritual mind, the mind of Christ. Neville says the way that we do this, he says, you and I must spend a few minutes every day, withdrawing our attention from the region of sensation and concentrating it on an invisible state, an invisible state, and remain faithful to this contemplation, feeling and sensing the reality of an invisible state. And if we do this, we will, in time, become aware of this dimensionally larger world. Okay, so what he's describing here is spending, or in this case, investing, right? Because this is an investment. It has dividends, it has a payoff. It's an investment of time. Investing time, withdrawing our attention, which is our life force energy. It's the most valuable currency we have. Withdrawing our attention from the region or the realm of the carnal mind, meaning withdrawing our thoughts, withdrawing our focus, withdrawing our attention from whatever we can sense using our five senses. Whatever the world is right around us, whatever we can touch, taste, smell, hear, see, we withdraw our attention from that. And we begin to refocus our attention to an invisible state, something that we can't perceive with our five carnal senses. And by doing this, by investing this most valuable currency that we have, our attention, in building our relationship, our connection, even the neural pathways with this higher dimensional realm of thinking, we will transcend the carnal mind and begin to become aware or begin to dwell within the awareness of a dimensionally larger world, meaning that we can begin to break the habit of 3D thinking and begin to build the habit of four-dimensional awareness. Tonight, as we turn to our Bible, you be the judge as to where you stand in your present unfoldment. We're going to turn now to Mark chapter 5. I am reading from the New Living Translation, and I'm going to read the first story. There's I think, three stories. Yeah. There's three stories here in this chapter. I'm going to read the first story, and then Neville will give his interpretation, and then we'll go to the second story, and we'll kind of work our way through it there. So I'm going to start Mark chapter 5, New Living Translation. This is what it says. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the land of the Gerasenes. Just as Jesus was climbing from the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit ran out from a cemetery to meet him. This man lived among the tombs and could not be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and he smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to control him. All day long and throughout the night, he would wander among the tombs and in the hills, screaming and hitting himself with stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him. He ran to meet Jesus and fell down before him. He gave a terrible scream, shrieking, "Why are you bothering me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? For God's sake, do not torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." And then Jesus asked, "What is your name?" And the spirit replied, "Legion, because there are many of us here inside the man." Then the spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the evil spirits begged. Jesus gave them permission. So the evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake where they were drowned. The herdsmen fled to the nearby city and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. Everyone rushed out to see for themselves. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, but they were frightened when they saw the man who had been demon-possessed, for he was sitting there, now fully clothed and perfectly sane. Those who had seen what had happened to the man and to the pigs told everyone about it, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. When Jesus got back into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go too. But Jesus said, "No, go home to your friends and tell them what wonderful things the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to tell everyone about the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. Moving to Neville's words, he says, our first story for tonight is from the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. In this chapter, there are 3 stories told as though they were separate experiences of the dominant characters. In the first story, we are told that Jesus comes upon an insane man, a naked man, who lived in the cemetery and hid himself behind the tombs. This man appealed to Jesus not to cast out the devils that bedeviled him. But Jesus said unto him, "Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit." Mark 5:8. Thus Jesus cast out the devils, that they may now destroy themselves. And we find this man for the first time, clothed and in his right mind, seated at the feet of the Master. Now, we will get the psychological sense of this chapter if we change the name Jesus to that of enlightened reason or fourth dimensional thinking, the spiritual mind, the Christ mind, the mind of the Creator. And if you've been following Sunday Mystery School, we understand that this is also the mind of the author. The spiritual mind, the fourth dimensional mind, is the mind of the Creator, or as we like to call it, the mind of the author, the one who is in authorship. And the 3D mind, the carnal mind, the mind that is limited to the realm of the 5 senses, is the character, the person that we are playing as we layer on to the root consciousness I am, stories and identities. Everything that we believe that we are as a character and living out some sort of life in the world of Caesar, the name that we believe that we have, the skills or preferences or ideas or beliefs, all of which characterize our state of being. These are all things written by someone or something, or as we're coming to understand, written by the spiritual mind, the fourth dimensional mind, the Creator mind, the Christ mind, the author mind, writes all of these details into being, and they are by definition malleable. Although many of them can become habitual, habits are not law, meaning that when we enter the state of the author, we always have the opportunity to rewrite the character, to rewrite the beliefs, the identity, the preferences, the ideas, whatever regions of thinking or of thought or even of sensation that dominate that 3D mind. We in the state of the author have the opportunity to rewrite it. Okay? That is what is being dramatized in this story about the insane man living among the tombstones, right? Where dead things are buried, the old stories are buried. Okay? So we're going to revisit this story, but instead of looking at it as Jesus, some person who lived thousands of years ago, which would be imagining that this is a story acted out in history, we're going to understand this is a story acted out within our own consciousness, within our own minds, within our own awareness of being. And so we're going to change our understanding to align with this by changing the name Jesus to that of the author mind or the spiritual mind, the Christ mind, the Creator mind. Okay? So we have this insane man living in a cemetery, hiding behind tombs, appealing to the spiritual mind, the mind of the Creator, to please not cast out the devils that bedeviled him. And if we look at not just the story as Neville told it, but we look at the actual scripture, it says he is wandering among the tombs and in the hills, screaming and hitting himself with stones. Now, if you have examined any of the stories of the Bible previously through the fourth dimensional mind and understood the metaphorical nature of these stories, you may understand that stones represent, metaphorically, the facts of life. So we have an insane man who is tortured, hitting himself over the head with the facts of life, clearly suffering, clearly being tortured by dead ideas, and even to the point where he's literally hitting himself over the head with the facts of life. Now, I don't know who among us, probably most of us, if not all of us, can identify with this state. All of us have been, probably at some time, this insane person hitting ourselves over the head with the facts of life when we are limited only to the realm or the region of our carnal mind, our 3D mind, the mind that is only paying attention to what appears to be real as measured by our five senses. And we are feeling hopeless. We're feeling attacked by the circumstances of life. That is equivalent of hitting ourselves over the head with the facts of life, or in this case, dramatized as stones. Okay? We're going to continue with the rest of these stories because where we're going with this is we're understanding that this is all one story being told, dramatized three ways. Okay, just as the whole Bible is really one story being told, dramatized unnumbered ways. It's the same thing in this chapter. So we're going to keep going. We're going to weave all these little pieces and parts together. Okay, so Neville says, as we progress in this chapter, we are told that Jesus now comes upon the high priest, whose name is Jairus. And Jairus, the high priest of the synagogue, has a child who is dying. She is 12 years old, and he appeals to this higher dimensional spiritual mind, the mind of the author, to come and heal the child. Spiritual mind consents. And as the spiritual mind of enlightened reason starts towards the home of the high priest, a woman in the marketplace touches his garment. And Jesus, immediately knowing that virtue had gone out of him, this higher dimensional mind is like, wait a second, I just created something. Okay? Jesus turns around and says, who touched me? For I feel that virtue has gone out of me. The woman who was healed instantly by touching his clothes from an issue of blood that she had had for 12 years confessed that she had touched him. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace. As he continues towards the home of the high priest, he is told that the child is now dead, and there is no need to go and visit anymore because it's too late. It's too late. The carnal mind is like, nope, whatever just happened is now a fact. It cannot be unwritten, right? The carnal mind doesn't believe in miracles, right? The carnal mind is limited to the evidence of the senses. This dream that I had is dead. Nothing else to do. It's over. I don't need enlightened reason to come and help me resurrect it, right? And Jesus says, no, no, no. This child is not dead, but merely sleeping. As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, saying, nope, this child is dead, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, and notice how it's the ruler of the synagogue, okay? This is not some ordinary fisherman, janitor, village person. This is a person with rank within the world of Caesar, okay? This is someone who, from external appearances, you would think probably understands this stuff, right? and yet still manages to lose hope and say, you know what? The dream is dead. This child of mine is dead. And this is what Jesus says to the ruler of the synagogue. He says, be not afraid, right? Because where does fear live? Fear lives within the carnal mind. The mind of God has no fear. Be not afraid, only believe. Enters into the house. All of the people are there and they're mourning the death of this child, which represents a dream. The child is dead. We're mourning, we're crying, we're sobbing. The carnal mind is certain that it's over, right? The dream is lost. And Jesus, spiritual mind, enlightened reason, the mind of God, the mind of the author, the mind of the creator says, why are you weeping and mourning? Why are you making all of this fuss? The child, the damsel, this dream of yours, it's not dead. It is merely sleeping. Mark 5:39. With this, the carnal mind, this crowd of ideas, crowd of voices within the carnal mind, mocks and laughs, saying he thinks this dead dream is actually just sleeping. How foolish. But Jesus, spiritual mind, mind of the author, pays them no attention. He goes into the room and he closes the door of the senses. He closes the door against all of those voices saying this dream is dead. Anything that you try to do to resurrect it will be done in vain. It's game over. The story is finished. It's written. This is a loss. And Jesus, the higher spiritual mind, says there is no such thing. I am living in a model of reality that is modeled on consciousness. And I know that my consciousness creates reality. And I know that any dream can never die. It can only sleep. Let me close the doors of my senses against the crowd that is mocking and laughing these ideas, against the carnal mind, which, again, has no comprehension of the things of God and considers them to be foolishness. Let me close the mind against the doubters, against the disbelievers, against those who are in fear. And let me enter into the state of being the author. Notice what he does. He brings into the silence with him his disciples. Now we understand, as students, the mystic teachings, and particularly of these ancient storytellers who wrote the Bible, we understand that the disciples represent not people per se, but rather the disciplined elements of the spiritual mind. Disciples, the disciplined elements of the spiritual mind. Now, I've covered this in tremendous detail in other series on my YouTube channel. We've gone disciple by disciple and completely revealed what each disciple represents. But just to give you an idea, it's the discipline of the hearing, by choosing to hear only what the spiritual mind is saying and ignoring whatever the carnal mind wants to hear about what is true. It's a discipline of the tongue, what I'm saying, discipline of what I choose to see, discipline of the ideas that I allow to be implanted in my mind. Okay, so we're closing the door against the carnal mind, against all of the naysayers, the doubters, the haters, the people who are living in fear, which can not only be people outside of ourselves, but also just the parts of our mind that aren't fully on board with what we're doing when we go into the creator state. We have to shut that down, shut that off, go into the silence, close the doors. And who do we bring with us? The disciplined qualities of our mind. We go into the silence. We bring with us the disciples and also the father and the mother of the dead child, which also represent the creative factors of the dream. Bringing the creative elements of the dream, the desire and the state that would fulfill it, the mother, the father, with our disciplined qualities of mind into the sense, into the room away from the senses. Okay, so we're closing the door against the senses. We're going into the sacred space, and look how the storytellers are telling us what to bring with us into the silence, into this sacred space. Entered into the room, just him, the desire and its sense of fulfillment, the mother, father, and the disciplined qualities of mind. And what is Jesus? The spiritual mind, the mind of the author. What does he do? He takes the dead child, which isn't dead, of course, but only sleeping, by the hand, this dream that appeared to be dead. He takes the damsel by the hand and he says unto her, Damsel, I say unto you, arise. Mark 5:41. From this deep sleep, this child, which is this dream, and can represent any dream that you and I have of bringing to fulfillment, that may appear to be dead for now, but with the application of the spiritual mind, the mind of the author, the mind of the creator, the Christ mind, fourth dimensional thinking, from this deep sleep, the dream awoke and arose and walked. And the high priest and all of the others were astonished. And he told them, do not tell anyone what has happened here. Give this child something to eat. You are this very day, as you are seated here, pictured, you and I, we are pictured in this fifth chapter of Mark. This fifth chapter of Mark is about every being alive right now. A cemetery is for one purpose. A cemetery is a record of the dead. Cemetery is a record of the dead. Are you and I, are we living in the dead past? A record of the dead, a record of that which has been. When we're living in the evidence of the senses, when we're living in the 3D world, everything that we see around us is what has been, okay? Because anything that is yet to be is where? In the fourth dimension, in the mind of Christ, in the realm of imagination. You and I are living among the tombstones. We're living among that which has already been, a record of the dead. Neville says, if you are living among the dead, your prejudices based on evidence of the past, accumulated, I've seen things happen this way before. That's now a prejudice, right? That our carnal mind can bring into the present. If we have a prejudice, if we have superstitions, if we have beliefs that are false, which any beliefs that are predicated on a material universe or come solely from the carnal mind are by definition false, because they do not recognize the fullness of the extent of the possibility that we have in the creator state. If we have prejudices, if we have superstitions, when we have false beliefs that we keep alive, these become the tombstones that we hide behind while we hit ourselves over the head with the stones, which are the facts, the so-called facts, that which has been of life. Anything that you want and all of the reasons why you can't have it, right, that are made up by the carnal mind. These are the stones, right? I desire to be healthy, but the doctor tells me there's a diagnosis. So I wring my hands, like a crazy person, hit myself over the heads with this diagnosis, okay, with the stones of the facts. Oh, I want to be healthy, but the doctor gave me a diagnosis. I'm hitting myself over the head with the facts. The doctor gave me the diagnosis. Focus on this over and over and over again, right? Creating it, making it more alive, making it more real. The crazy person hiding among the record of the past, okay, the carnal mind. If you refuse to let these go, Neville says, you are just as mad as the madman of the Bible, who pleaded with spiritual thinking, who pleaded with enlightened reason, who pleaded with Jesus to please don't cast these out. Okay, only a crazy person would argue for their limitations, right? At least from the level of thinking that we're coming from in this presentation. Only a crazy person would argue for their limitations. That's why this person is portrayed as being mad, because only a crazy person would argue against enlightened reason for their limitations. Neville says enlightened reason is incapable of protecting prejudice and superstition against the inroads of reason, which in this case is nothing is safe from the pen of the author. The author can rewrite anything. No prejudice, no superstition, no stone of the facts of life can survive the pen of the author when we enter into this spiritual mind, the mind of Christ, and we create from this level. There is not a man in this world who has a prejudice prejudice, something predicated upon what was, the tombstones, the record of the past. Regardless of what it is, not a man in the world who can hold it up to the light of reason, because when you know consciousness is the only reality and that I am is God, none of your arguments for your limitation can stand up to that. That light dispels all shadows. Neville continues. He says, tell me that you are against a certain nation or a certain race, a certain ism, a certain anything. I don't care what it is. You cannot expose that belief of yours to the light of reason and have it yet live. In order that it may be kept alive in your world, you must hide it from reason, because none of your limitations can continue to stand when you enter the state of author. He says, you cannot analyze any of your perceived limitations in the light of this level of thinking, in the light of enlightened reason, and have them live. When this fourth dimensional focus comes and shows you a new approach to life and casts out of your own mind all these things that tormented you, that bedeviled you, you are then cleansed of your limitations, and you are clothed in your right mind. And as you sit at the foot of understanding, you sit at the feet of the master. Seated at the feet of the master, understanding the feet, right? Seated at the feet, understanding the master, understanding enlightened reason, okay? So as a human being, you're standing under the spiritual mind as opposed to being dominated by the carnal mind, okay? Clothed in the right mind and seated at the foot of the master, which is the same thing as saying seated in a place of understanding of enlightened reason, understanding of authorship, understanding of the dimensional nature of reality. And now, clothed and in your right mind, you can resurrect the dead. What is it that died? Well, the child, as illustrated in the story, is not a child at all. The child represents your ambition, your desire, the unfulfilled dreams of your heart. This is the child that is housed within the mind of man. For as I have stated before, the entire drama of the Bible is a psychological one. The Bible is not history. It has no reference to any person who ever existed or any event that actually occurred on earth. Rather, the stories of the Bible unfold within each of our minds. They're unfolding within my mind. They're unfolding within your mind. They're unfolding within the mind of every conscious being, whether they are aware of these stories unfolding or not. In this story, Jesus represents as a character, personified, a state personified. Jesus represents the awakened intellect of man. And when your mind functions outside of the range of your present senses, when your mind functions outside of the carnal mind, the higher mind, when you tap into that spiritual mind, the mind of the author, the mind of the creator, the Christ mind, your mind is healed of all former limitations. And then you are no longer the insane man. You are the presence, personified as Jesus, the power that can resurrect the longings of the heart of man. Just as you and I are personified, our states of mind, our carnal mind is personified as the insane man, we are also personified in a second story, that of this woman with the issue of blood. What is this issue of blood? Well, it is a womb that was running. Okay, a running womb is not a productive womb. Okay, we're talking about the reproductive capabilities personified in this case as a woman. Okay, so the womb is running and is incapable of holding and producing a child, holding and producing a child, which is, of course, the personification of a dream. Okay? For 12 years, it's not a new problem. There's a long history. Okay? Long history. For 12 years, incapable of conceiving a desire into material fact. Okay? Incapable, running blood, unable to hold anything and bring it to birth in this womb. Okay? Could not give form to her longing because of this issue of the running of the blood. And you are told that her faith, touching enlightened reason, touching the spiritual mind, the mind of God, the mind of the Creator, the mind of the author, the Christ mind, by touching this mind, she was healed. Her faith closed the running womb. And as the womb closes, it can then give form to a seed, which is, of course, an idea. Neville says, as your mind is cleansed of your former concept of self, whatever that conception of limitation was, and as you assume that you are the person you desire to be, as you are remaining faithful to this assumption, you give form to your assumption and you resurrect your child. The assumption begins to take shape and form as a dream that is becoming true. And that dream that is becoming true is the child. Okay, so then you give birth to the child or resurrect the dream. Thus, each one of us are also this woman cleansed of the issue of blood as we move towards the house of the dead child. Neville says, the child or state you desired is now your fixed concept of yourself. But now, having assumed that I am what I used to want to be, right? So I used to be in a state of not it, wanting it. And then I move into I am it. And now that I am it, I can't continue to want to be it. I can't continue to want to be what I am, not in the way that we're describing. Like you're either not and then you wish you were, or you become and then you are. Okay, so now we are in the place where we know that we are. And Neville says, this is the part of the story where Jesus says, don't go and tell anyone what happened here. Okay, I do not discuss this. I don't talk to anyone. I don't need anyone's help. I don't need anyone else to be the authority. Author. I don't need anyone else to write it for me. I am the author. I write it for myself. I talk to no one else. I don't need their approval. I don't need their help. It is so obvious to me that I am what I wanted to be, that I walk as though I were. Because remember, this child was resurrected. Jesus told the parents, say nothing. The child begins to walk and he says, give this child something to eat. What does that giving the child something to eat represent? Walking as though you are and living from the assumption, thinking from the state, not thinking of the state as though it's over there, thinking from the state, meaning that you begin to feed the state. Give it something to eat, thinking from it. Feed it the food that is appropriate. You are the person that you desire to be, whatever that dream is. You feed that dream as though it were real now, because it is, because you are. Walking as though I am what I used to want to be. My world of limited focus does not see it and thinks that I no longer desire it. The child is dead in their world, but I who know the law can say, the child is not dead. The damsel is not dead. She but sleepeth. I now awaken her. By my assumption, I awaken and make visible in my world what it is that I assume. For assumptions, if sustained, invariably awaken what they affirm. Assumption must be sustained to awaken what I am affirming. Okay, so Next in this, he talks about the door. We talked about how the door is the evidence of the senses. Okay, so we suspend the limited reasoning of the natural man. We close the door to the evidence of the senses, the carnal mind, the crowd outside that gives all the reasons why we're potentially crazy for continuing to believe in something that appears to be dead. Okay, closing the mind away from that. What do we take into our disciplined state? Just the parents of the child and the disciplined qualities of our mind. I completely deny the evidence of my senses, which mock my assumption. Again, we were talking about the example of like, I'm assuming that I am healthy, but I have a diagnosis. That diagnosis is mocking my assumption of being healthy. Well, I close the door against that. I close the door against the evidence that would mock my assumption. And I don't discuss with another whether or not it's possible. Okay? Because I am the author. I don't need to delegate that authority to write as the author to anyone else. I assume that authority for myself. And of course, as we talked about, who are the parents? Well, the father, mother of all creation is our I amness. So we, enlightened reason, are bringing into the silence our I amness and our disciplined qualities of mind. The child, unaided by any man, is resurrected, meaning what I desired and assumed that I am or that I have becomes objectified within my world and bears witness to the power of my assumption. Okay, so this is where we really bring it in for a landing. Neville says, you be the judge because I cannot judge you. No one outside of you can judge you. Only you can be the judge of your own state of authorship for yourself. You are either living now in the dead past, or you are living as the woman whose issue of blood has been stanched or solved. Could you actually answer me if I asked you the question, do you believe now that you, without the assistance of anyone else, need only assume that you are what you want to be in order to make that assumption real within your world? Or do you believe that you must first fulfill a certain condition imposed upon you by the past, that you must be of a certain order, of a certain heritage or history, of a certain identity, of a certain lineage, certain something? Neville says, I am not being critical of certain churches or groups, but there are those who believe that anyone outside of their church or outside of their group is not yet saved. Neville says, I was born a Protestant, and if you talk to a Protestant, there's only one Christian, and that's a Protestant. If you talk to a Catholic, there's nothing in the world that is a Christian except a Catholic. If you talk to a Jew, the Christians are heathens, and the Jews are the chosen. You talk to any other type of religion, and you're just going to see them say, oh, our religion is right, everyone else is wrong. Okay? It doesn't matter who you're talking to, they always choose themselves as the chosen ones. And Neville says, if you believe that you must be one of these in order to be saved, you are still the insane man, hiding behind superstitions and prejudices of the past, screaming and hitting yourself over the head with the stones or the facts of life, and begging not to be cleansed. Some of you say to me, do not ask me to give up my belief in Jesus as a man, or in Moses as an actual living human being in the distant past, or in Peter as an actual living human being, a man in the distant past. When you ask me to give up my belief that these people were real, you're asking too much. Please let me keep these beliefs. They comfort me. It comforts me to think that Moses lived in the ancient past, that Peter was a real man that lived in the ancient past, that Jesus was a real man that lived in the ancient past. These comfort me. I can still believe that they lived upon earth and also follow your psychological interpretation of their stories. And this is what Neville says. He says, come out of the dead past. Come out of the cemetery and walk knowing that you and your Father are one, and your Father, whom men call God, is your own consciousness. That is the only creative law in the world. Of what are you conscious of being? Although you cannot see your objective with the limited focus of your 3D mind, you are now that which you assume you are. Walk in that assumption and remain faithful to it. Time, in this dimension of our being, beats slowly, and we may not, even after we objectify our assumption, remember that there was a time when this present reality was only just an attitude in our mind. Because of the slowness of the beat of time, we often fail to see the relationship between our inner nature and the outer world that bears witness to our inner nature. A very wise person once said, if you want to see what is in your mind, open your eyes and look at the world around you. You be the judge of the position you now occupy in this 5th chapter of Mark. Are you the one who is resurrecting the dead child? Are you still in need of having that womb of your mind closed? Is it still running and therefore cannot be fertile? Are you now the insane man living in the dead past? Only you can be the judge and answer these questions. Powerful and compelling message from Neville, from the Bible, from our ancestors, from the ancient storytellers, from the spiritual mind, today in Sunday Mystery School. Now going to invite anyone from the Zoom room who would like to share what they are present to after this compelling call to lucidity. That's how I'm going to put it, as a call to lucidity, a call to wake up, a call to return to the state of authorship, a call to sanity. Anything that anyone would like to share, you may do so now.
Hi, Josiah.
Hi, Orlana, go ahead.
Hi. So, just it was amazing, first and foremost. But do you think that people like just really don't want to take responsibility, you know, um for their authorship? You know what I mean? And that's the reason why you know, he's saying all this, that like he's repeating it, like you are the one, you know what I mean? That um your own consciousness is the one that's ruling everything. You know, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes. So it's written right into the story. When
Yeah.
the insane man living among the dead past comes to Jesus and pleads with them, please let me keep these limitations. Please let me continue to live in the dead past, arguing for the limitations. It's part of this. You could almost call it a battle. In a manner of speaking, it can be a battle between the carnal mind, higher mind. And people could say, well, why is there a battle? Like, why is this even happening? And I would say, well, part of just being human is
Okay.
really like transcending the spiral, right? So the
Okay.
spiral is from the carnal mind to the mind of God. That's what the whole Bible is about. It's illustrating this spiral of redemption, of resurrection, of
Yeah.
the mind of God out of the lower mind of man, the birth from below, which is literally becoming a human and coming out of a woman, and then the birth from above, which is really awakening this higher spiritual mind and beginning to have our lives and our reason and our way of thinking and our way of being, within the mind of Christ, above and beyond the carnal mind. The carnal mind now serves
Okay.
the mind of Christ,
So
right?
so yeah, so like internally, right? We know that life is about growth,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So then why do we like try to stay stagnant, I guess, in a way,
Yes.
it's
So
just a part of life.
yes. So fear lives
Yeah.
within the carnal mind. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the part of that man, the crazy man, who's arguing for his limitations, that's the voice of fear. Because
Okay.
fear is so fear by definition is going to be afraid of getting out of the comfort zone, right? Which if you've been living among the dead past and crazy for a long time, it's uncomfortable to
Mhm.
transcend limitations because you're potentially comfortable playing small, potentially comfortable not taking responsibility, right? Like
Mhm.
speaking from personal experience, when these teachings really started to plant very deeply within my own awareness, there was a period of time that I went through where I was really kind of stunned and shocked at
Yeah.
what I had allowed through ignorance, but still had allowed to
Mhm.
grow in the garden of my mind, within the garden of my life. It allowed these things, and I was like, well, I didn't know any better, but still they were there.
Yeah.
So I had to say, yeah, even though I didn't know any better, it was still me that planted these things. I still did
Right.
it. Yes,
Right.
even I am he. I
Mhm.
and so like that in the spiral of evolution, that's a place where each being arrives, where they
Mhm.
take that profound, powerful responsibility and say, yes, I am the one. And then whatever I don't want to continue to write, now I get to rewrite.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Orlana. Miss Hall.
Good morning, Josiah. And
Good morning.
I just want to say I'm so grateful for metaphysical Bible interpretation, for you and Neville and all the others who have come along and taught us how to really read the Bible. I was born and raised, because my father was the pastor, in a Pentecostal Church of God in Christ spiritual environment. And although I loved God, I was just so afraid of the devil and hell and all those stories.
Yes.
And one day I was listening on Facebook or reading on Facebook, and a guy came up and he was a metaphysician. And the way that he talked about it, I knew there was something good and deep and rich, And so I started studying like 15 years ago. But there are still things I'm learning. Like today, when you um, gave the interpretation of the stones being the facts that he was hitting himself with and arguing for his limitations. And when you talked about or the diagnoses, I recently got a diagnosis about, saying that I needed a hip replacement. And I immediately went to like metaphysical and spiritual treatment and physical, working out the muscles around my hip to strengthen them. And I'm so much better after just like 3 days. So I just want to uh, express my appreciation to you and all the other metaphysicians who have just changed my life. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you for calling that out. Yes, there's more in that story even than what I was able to share within the limited time of this mystery school session. As I was reading, and I gave some of the stuff there from the insane man, but like if you go through and you read all the way through those three stories, there's all these little details that the storytellers wove in, and it's like now that we know that this is the case, every single story, it's like they are telling us something. There's a reason why this is here. There's a reason why they're including it. And the more that light of perception, grows and is able to perceive the wisdom that is woven into these stories, the greater the multidimensional transmission of wisdom is. And so it's beautiful, and it's just like mind and consciousness expanding, and also as you're giving from your personal example, like very applicable, like to everyday life. This is why they call it the living word of God, because it's like it comes alive and it speaks to you about where you are right now, because it's about where you are right now within your
Absolutely.
actual awareness. And that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Andrea.
Thank you.
uh Natasha, are you next?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Josiah. Hi, everybody. I didn't really have anything to add. I just wanted to second like my deep gratitude for this. This was such a huge fucking wake up call for me where I was like, oh my God, I woke up again. I needed this. So massive thank you, massive love. Like I wish we could be here 24/7 because it's just I'm like speechless. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Natasha. Thank you. Yes, I love what you said about like waking up like that. That's so like the spiral. We talked about the spiral last week. Shweta gave a presentation on that. Like there very much is this thing where like kind of doze off a little bit, then like shocked back awake. And like the goal is over time, you begin to exist more and more in that state of being awake. And it's exactly why we started Sunday Mystery School, was to make it this weekly ritual of like, let's like, like a strong shot of espresso, like every Sunday, let's come back to this and remind ourselves. So thank you for being on board for that. Jamie, you're next.
Hi, Josiah.
Hello.
Hi. It's always so powerful. It takes me back to experiences in my own life. This idea of authorship today reminds me of a very sweet story that I had read, and I was very fascinated with as a child because that concept was just so delicious. And the story was called The Magic Paintbrush. So everything that this child painted came to life, and it's such a metaphor for, the creative process. I remember as a child being completely taken by that magical concept, like, oh, that could be true. Like, what if I had a magic paintbrush? Turns out we all do.
Yes, we do.
But what would you say to someone, and this, where these concepts rationally and they're starting to sink deeper and deeper, and you believe them, but somebody that needs to take that first step to jump off the abyss and trust that, yes, I am the creator. I can, bring that 12-year-old dead girl / dream. I can bring it to life. What would you say to someone like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a very wise saying that has circulated for a long time, and it's, too much light too soon will blind a person, right? So it's like when you're saying someone's like kind of really sunk deep, it's important to be aware that with profound responsibility can really, like, taking that level of profound responsibility can't really come from without, but we can, as loving human beings who desire the best for those around us, we can always plant seeds of possibility and then imagine wisely for that person, meaning in our mind's eye, see their possibility. And then in terms of what we say to them, just like that story, the magic paintbrush, that was a very loving planting of possibility by the author in the minds of children around the world. The author was like, how do I inspire children around the world? I'm going to write this story that's really about our imagination, but I'm going to clothe it in this kind of imaginative tale, right? To like really plant these seeds of possibility in the minds of children. It's a beautiful, loving act on behalf of this author. We can mimic that, kind of tender and loving state by just planting little seeds of possibility. I think it was Greg Braden gave me this. He was, I was in a class of his, and he was describing what being in a state of compassion truly is. And he was describing it as being fully present with the person who is suffering, and like being present, being with them, right? Like allowing them to feel and experience what they're feeling, but also holding in our space a vision of their possibility. That's what true compassion is. We don't dive into the sewer with them. We're the one putting down the ladder and like holding the vision that they can climb out, holding the vision that they will come out, right? Like that's the true definition of compassion, is being able to sit with them, loving them, but also holding that vision of what their possibility is.
Wow, that just hit home. I'm getting ready to go visit family in Kenya for 2 weeks, and there's always a lot of triggers there.
Yes.
So I think I'm going to pre-pave that visit. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Josiah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the metaphors. I feel like everything was just like a little boost that's like really refreshing. And it reminded me of like in the past, there's a poem by Langston Hughes. I don't know if anybody knows it, Harlem, where it's like, what happens to a dream deferred? And it's a really powerful poem. I recommend like looking it up. But just stopping at that line, it takes me back to another phrase that I've been referring to for the past few years called a linear, which is the beginning of a new train of thought.
Yes.
So we get to decide.
Yes.
And a dream deferred can be replenished,
Yes.
just as in the story. And I just really liked how it kind of came together. At first I was like, oh, why is this person not wanting to get rid of, you know, the demons and so forth? And it's like, well, actually that's just me almost every day. You know, like it's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results.
Yes.
But
Yes.
we can shift
Yes.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Wonderful contributions from you all. Thank you so much for that. Any other thoughts from the Zoom room? Okay, my final thought for you all is I spoke a little bit about this in the Zoom room before going on YouTube, but I think some of you weren't here yet. So I'm going to say it again. So I've been watching the Olympics and watching it through the frame of being the author, meaning that I'm aware of the state of authorship. And I'm also aware that what we see in these athletes competing at the the very best of the best, competing against the very, very best of the best, what we are seeing really is dreams being like so I posted in my community tab a quote from Dave Chappelle, right? So Dave Chappelle was sharing about how one of the lessons that he's learned in his life, being a dreamer himself, dreaming of being a famous comedian, dreaming of being wealthy and recognized and known when he was, poor and not recognized and unknown. He literally dreamed his life into being. And so he was sharing this, and he said, well, one thing that I've learned that I really want to share with all of you is that the most powerful dream in any given moment wins that moment. And so I'm watching the Olympics, and I'm watching these people just competing at the very peak performance to tenths of like hundreds, fractions of seconds difference, and realizing the only thing that makes that difference is the power of that person's dream. And seeing some of these people and how powerful they have dreamed, this dream into being and are living their dream. It's such an amazing inspiration. And so if you've been watching it at all, or if you're curious about it all, I want to say that out loud here on YouTube. I want to encourage you, when you're watching these things, watch it through that lens, because you are seeing it made visible. These are literally stories of people who are seeing it in their imagination first and then bringing it to life by having a super powerful dream in the moment. And I think we're seeing dramatized lessons that all of us can learn from. So I will leave you all with that. I'm so glad to be back with Sunday Mystery School. We're going to continue with lesson 3, Thinking Fourth Dimensionally. There's a lot more here. We're going to keep it going. So I'll see you all again next week. And until then, imagine wisely, my friends, and continue to dream your most powerful dreams.